Hello class, welcome to week 7. This week we are going to be covering cross-genre horror. So our first question is why combine separate genres? One reason is to increase the audience appeal. So multiple genres means more fans in the same theater. You've got folks that like one genre, folks that like another genre. You put them all in the same theater. Theoretically, you get twice as many people, but math doesn't quite work like that. Also to do something new or spice up something old. So you're trying something new by combining genres that haven't been combined before, as if that can happen because everything's been combined by now. But you take like an idea of, say, a classic franchise, and then you spice it up with something else. Say you put Jason Voorhees in space or something like that. Boom, you've got something new. It may not be a good idea, but at least you're trying, okay? What other genres combine well with horror? Horror and sci-fi. This is a classic one that tends to go very well together. You've got scary aliens, suspense, transformations, blood and guts, and it's all science. So it fits into science fiction and it also fits into horror. Great stuff, combines really well. Horror and action, so the story moves faster, bigger budgets, but the subtleties of horror gets destroyed by explosions, machine guns, and tight pants, all the things you have to have in a horror action film, which are kind of antithetical to horror. But there is the potential to create something really big and really cool at the same time. And you may have a little bit of action thrown into some other cross-genre, horror, sci-fi, for example. Though a little bit of action works well. Too much action, it really kind of blows up the horror. But that's just like my opinion, you know. Horror and teen angst. You got the dangers of premarital sex smokescreened by fur and fangs. But it's not scary. That's the problem. And that's the issue with the whole Twilight series, which a lot of you wrote papers talking about that. Not scary vampires, not scary werewolves. I think the only thing scary was like the birth scene, which like literally killed a person who watched the movie. He had like a heart attack. That's scary. But for the most part, horror plus teen angst is not scary. With one exception, which we may get into the next part of the class, which is Donnie Darko, which is kind of a horror, teen angst, sci-fi, whole lot of other films thrown into it. It's kind of a psychological horror film too. That's the one exception to the rule. Most of the others, not scary. So horror and comedy, on the other hand, that's a pretty common one too. So why would horror and comedy work? You would think they would be total opposites. But fear and excitement and humor and happiness are similarly excited states, and they actually trigger the same areas of the brain. So laughing and crying are similar emotional responses. I'm sure there's been a point where you have laughed so hard you cried, and then there may have been a point where you cried so hard that you laughed. Horror films are also already inherently funny. So victims do stupid things. Masked killers and zombies are clumsy and slow. It's like, how are they actually getting people? I don't understand that, but they still do. And the dialogue is often laughable, which is sometimes intentional and most of the time is not. So almost every horror film uses comic relief to put you off guard. And that's why you have the comedian or the nerd getting killed. So he's like cracking a joke somewhere, wanders off to pee or do something else, and then boom, he gets killed. So that's one thing. It kind of takes you off your guard, and then that way it kind of brings the horror back to it. So that's something that regular horror films will do, but you bring more comedy into it, and you can actually create a cross-genre film in which it's equal amounts horror and comedy. And we already kind of watched an example of that, which was An American Werewolf in London, which had a lot of horror and it had a lot of comedy as well. Black Sheep is another good example. It's a film from New Zealand about zombie sheep. I highly recommend that. Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which covers a lot of the conventions of slasher films. And quite another funny film. I've used it for this class quite a bit. And of course, The Evil Dead. And with that one, it's hard to tell how much of it was intentional, how much of it wasn't, but it is both horrific and hilarious at the same time. And of course, Evil Dead 2 even more so, and then of course, Army of Darkness. So our film for this week is What We Do in the Shadows from 2014, directed by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, two names you probably recognize from a lot of other stuff. They just happen to be fellow New Zealanders. So our synopsis, 3 vampires sharing a house in Wellington, New Zealand, find that being undead, immortal blood drinkers in the modern world comes with certain challenges. And it re-examines many of the traditional vampire legends and stereotypes, often pitting them against many of the more mundane aspects of urban life. And of course, all shot like a faux documentary, which just ties that whole thing together. And it also includes werewolves, zombies, and Nazis. So it's got a whole lot of stuff in this, and I thought it was good to kind of finish with horror on a funny note. Okay? Because this is our last horror film, per se, for right now. So just thought I'd let you folks know that. Anyway, enjoy the film, answer the study questions, and then I'm going to record another video about the upcoming exam.